The letter opener made a clean sound as it cut through the envelope. Margaret Prescott set the paper on the table without looking up. "Pack what fits in one bag," she said, "and leave." Claire was 8 months pregnant. She had lived in this house for 3 years. She had eaten breakfast at this table. She had believed, completely and without question, that she was part of this family. She looked at her husband standing in the doorway. He looked at the floor. She picked up the bag that was already waiting by the front door. They had packed it before she arrived. They had planned this before she ever walked into the room. She walked out. What none of them knew, not Margaret, not Garrett, not the husband who could not meet her eyes, was that Claire's father had spent 30 years building something for exactly this moment, a $14 billion trust fund. And today was the day it was about to change everything. Lesson statement. Sometimes the people who try to take everything from you are the very ones who hand you the key to your own power. Because a father's love, built quietly over 30 years, is the kind of fortress that no one sees coming until it is already too late. If this story moved you, if you have ever felt invisible, underestimated, or pushed out of a place you deserve to be, you are not alone. Claire's story is for every woman who was told she was not enough, right before she discovered exactly how much she had always been. If you want more stories like this one, stories about women who find their strength when everything falls apart, hit that like button right now. It only takes a second, and it means everything to this channel. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever had a moment when you finally saw the truth about someone you trusted? We read every single comment, and your story matters here. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it today. You never know who needs exactly this story at exactly this moment. And if you are new here, welcome. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a story. A new one arrives every week, and trust us, you do not want to miss what is coming next.
The sound came first. A silver letter opener sliding through an envelope. Clean. Precise. Like everything else in the Prescott mansion. Margaret Prescott set the paper on the dining room table without looking up. Her reading glasses caught the morning light. Her posture was perfect as always. Her silk blouse was pressed, as always. Her expression was the expression of a woman removing an inconvenient piece of furniture from a room she was redesigning. "We have had the guest house prepared," she said. "But given the circumstances, we think it is best if you find other arrangements, permanently." Claire Whitmore Prescott was standing in the doorway of the dining room she had eaten breakfast in for 3 years. Her ankles were swollen. Her back had ached for 6 weeks without stopping. She was wearing her husband's old college sweatshirt because nothing else fit anymore. She was 8 months pregnant. She did not immediately understand what was happening. "I am sorry," Claire said. "Could you say that again?" Margaret finally looked at her. The look was not cruel exactly. It was something worse than cruel. It was the look of someone completing a transaction they had been planning for a long time. "The Prescott family has certain standards," Margaret said. She folded her hands on the table. "Standards we perhaps did not make sufficiently clear when Donovan brought you home. We have consulted with our attorney. The prenuptial agreement is quite comprehensive." Claire's hand moved to her stomach. Automatic, protective. "I am 8 months pregnant," Claire said. The words came out quietly, almost like a question, as though she needed to remind the room of a fact it had somehow forgotten. "Yes," Margaret said, "which is why we are asking you to leave now before the child arrives. It will be cleaner." Cleaner. The word landed somewhere in Claire's chest like something dropped from a great height. She looked at Margaret. She looked at Garrett Prescott, seated in the far armchair, with a newspaper he was absolutely not reading. She looked at the morning light coming through the tall windows. She looked at the Persian rug with its intricate pattern of deep reds and blues that she had once thought was beautiful. Then she looked at the doorway. Donovan was standing in the doorway. He had been there the whole time. He was not coming in. He was not saying anything. He was studying the pattern on the Persian rug the way a man studies something when he cannot bring himself to look at the people in the room. Claire's hand went to her phone. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock. She almost called out to him. She almost said his name in the voice she used when she needed him. The voice she had used 100 times over 3 years. The voice she had believed until this exact moment that he responded to. She put the phone in her pocket. "Donovan," she said instead. He cleared his throat. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket. He looked at a spot approximately 6 inches above her left shoulder. "Claire, my mother has some valid concerns about I am carrying your child." The sentence was very simple. She said it very simply. Silence. The clock on the mantel ticked. 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 Garrett turned a page of the newspaper he was not reading. "The car service will take you wherever you need to go," Margaret said. She was already moving toward the hallway. "Already done with this conversation. I had Rosita pack some of your things. 1 bag. The rest can be arranged through the lawyers." 1 bag. Claire was 8 months pregnant, and she had been reduced to 1 bag. She stood in the dining room for 3 more seconds. She was waiting. Some part of her was still absolutely certain that someone in this room was going to step forward. Someone was going to say the words, "Wait, no. This is wrong. She is our family." No one stepped forward. She walked to the front door. The bag was already there. A single black, rolling suitcase sitting on the marble floor of the foyer, next to the umbrella stand, next to the flowers Margaret had delivered fresh every Monday for as long as Claire had lived in this house. The bag was heavy, much heavier than she expected. She did not know why that detail was the one that broke something open in her. Not the words, not Margaret's expression, not Donovan standing in the doorway like a man who had forgotten how to be a person. It was the weight of the bag that told her the truth. Someone had packed it carefully. Someone had thought about this. Someone had planned it before today. She picked it up and she walked out. The car was waiting in the circular drive. Black, tinted windows, a driver she did not recognize, which meant they had sent someone new so she would not have an ally even in this small way. She got in. The door closed behind her. Through the tinted windows, she watched the front door of the Prescott mansion. She watched it for a long time. It did not open. No one came after her. She took out her phone. She called the only person she could think of. Renee picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" Renee said. She had the voice of someone who had been awake for a while, moving around her apartment, starting a normal Thursday. "Renee," Claire said, "I need you." Something in her voice communicated everything. There was a pause of less than 1 second. "Where are you?" Renee said. "In a car they sent for me." Claire pressed her fingers against the cool glass of the window. "They kicked me out." A silence. Then Renee's voice. Very carefully controlled. Very careful in the way that meant she was keeping something much louder locked behind her teeth for later. "Claire, are you safe?" "I don't know," Claire said honestly. "I'm coming. Stay on the phone." Claire stayed on the phone. She watched the Prescott estate disappear behind its own manicured hedges. She watched the gate close in the rear window. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby kicked, hard, 3 times. "Okay," Claire thought. "Okay. I hear you." She pressed her palm against the place where the kick had been. She did not cry. Not yet. There was something happening inside her that was moving too fast to be grief yet. Grief was slow. Grief settled in over time. This was something else. This was the specific feeling of watching a picture you had been building for 3 years crack straight down the center while you were still holding it. She thought about the morning she had found out she was pregnant. She had been sitting on the bathroom floor with the test in her hand and she had been terrified and thrilled in equal measure. And Donovan had come in and found her there, and he had knelt down beside her, and he had said, "Claire, this is the best thing that has ever happened to me." She had believed him. She had been so completely certain he meant it. Renee was still talking. Claire could hear her voice, steady and warm, through the phone. She focused on it. She held onto it the way you hold onto something solid when the ground is moving. "Okay," Renee was saying. "Okay. Here's what we are going to do. You are going to come here. You're going to put your feet up because your ankles are a situation. And then you are going to tell me everything, and I am going to listen. And when you are done, I am going to say what I have been wanting to say for approximately 2 years." "What have you been wanting to say?" Claire asked. "Later," Renee said. "First you come here." Claire closed her eyes. She leaned her head back against the seat. "Okay," she said. "I'm coming." Outside, the city moved past the windows, people walking, a man with a coffee, a woman pushing a stroller, a dog waiting patiently at a crosswalk. All of it perfectly normal. All of it completely unreachable. Renee's apartment smelled like vanilla candles and the specific brand of dryer sheets she had used since college. It was small and warm, and every surface had something on it. A book, a plant, a photograph, a half-finished coffee mug. It was the apartment of someone who actually lived in their home instead of performing living in it. Claire sat on the couch with her feet elevated on the ottoman because Renee had put the ottoman in front of her before she had even fully sat down. Renee was in the kitchen. Claire could hear her moving, filling the kettle, setting mugs on the counter, doing something with her hands before she said what she actually thought. Claire knew this about Renee. They had been friends since the first week of college. She knew exactly what Renee's controlled kitchen sounds meant. "How long has his mother hated you?" Renee asked. Her voice was even. "She does not hate me," Claire said. Then she stopped. She considered the dining room, Margaret's folded hands, the letter opener. "She does not hate me. She just never saw me. I was always the girl Donovan brought home from the wrong zip code." "You grew up in Connecticut." "Not the right part of Connecticut." Renee came in with 2 mugs. She set one in front of Claire and sat down in the armchair across from her, and looked at her with the direct look that was one of the things Claire had always loved most about her. "What did Donovan say?" Renee said. After. Claire wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth spread into her palms. "Nothing," she said. "Nothing. He texted me about an hour after the car dropped me off." She pulled out her phone and read the message out loud. "Claire, I am so sorry about how that went. Can we talk when things settle down?" Renee looked at the phone, then at Claire, then back at the phone. "When things settle down," Renee said. "When things settle down," Claire said. "You are 8 months pregnant." "I know. You are 8 months pregnant, and you are sleeping on my couch. Your pull-out bed. My pull-out bed, which has a bar in it that I have been meaning to fix for 18 months. Renee set down her mug, and he wants to talk when things settle down. He did not say settle down. He said when things settle down. Claire paused. "I don't know what the difference is. The difference is he is making it sound like things just happened to become unsettled on their own, like a weather event. Like you are being inconvenienced by a storm he had nothing to do with." Claire did not say anything. She looked at her mug. That night she could not sleep. She lay in Renee's guest room, which was actually Renee's home office, with the desk pushed against the wall and the pull-out bed extended into the middle of the floor. The bar in the middle of the mattress pressed against her lower back. She shifted left, she shifted right. Eleanor moved inside her in the slow, rolling way she had been moving for the past 3 weeks, like someone turning over in a dream. The ceiling was white. The room was quiet, except for the sound of the city outside the window and the hum of Renee's refrigerator through the wall. Claire started to think. She started at the beginning, their first meeting at the gallery. The way Donovan had appeared at her elbow and said something about the painting she was looking at, something genuinely observant that had surprised her. She had thought she was meeting someone real. She had thought she was meeting someone who actually looked at things. She moved forward through 3 years. The Christmas Eve, when Margaret had criticized her roast, and Donovan had laughed along with his mother. The laugh had been small. She had told herself it was nothing. The charity gala, when Margaret introduced her to 3 separate people as Donovan's wife, with a pause before the word wife that Claire had told herself was just Margaret's particular speech pattern. The conversation 6 months ago, when Margaret had suggested, gently, that a woman with Claire's background might find motherhood quite an adjustment. She had told herself it was nothing. She had been telling herself it was nothing for 3 years. God, she thought, I was so stupid. The signs were all there. Every single one, right there in front of her. And she had decided not to look directly at them, because looking directly at them would have required her to do something about what she saw. And she had been so completely invested in the picture she had built that she had chosen the picture over the truth every single time. She had been so certain she had married someone decent. She had built an entire life around that certainty. At 6 in the morning, she called Donovan. He picked up on the 4th ring. His voice was thick. He had been asleep. She noted this. She had not slept. He had. Claire, he said. I need you to tell me what happened, she said. Not what your mother decided. What happened. What you decided. A pause. She could hear him breathing. She could hear him choosing his words. The family has concerns about the direction of our marriage, he said. The sentence was so polished, so completely rehearsed, that her breath caught. Say that again, she said quietly. There are concerns. Donovan, her voice did not shake. That is a press release. Talk to me like a person. Another pause, longer this time. My father had a business arrangement with your family years ago, he said. His voice was quieter now, less rehearsed. Something underneath it that might have been shame. Something went wrong. My parents feel that the marriage was ill-advised, given the history. A business arrangement. Claire's hand tightened around the phone. What business arrangement? She said. I do not have all the details. What business arrangement, Donovan? Silence. Claire, I think you should speak to your mother, he said finally. There are things about your father's estate that I was not told until recently. Things my family... Your family what? He stopped talking. The silence stretched out between them like something physical, like a distance she could measure. In that silence, she heard everything she needed to hear. He knew something. He had known something before they were married. And now that the Prescotts had decided whatever arrangement they had been counting on was no longer useful to them, she was being discarded. I am not sad, she realized. I am furious. I am going to speak to my mother, she said. Her voice was completely level. And then I'm going to find out exactly what your family knows about my father. And then we are going to have a very different conversation than the one you seem to be preparing for. She hung up. She called her mother. Diane Whitmore picked up immediately, before the second ring, like she had been sitting with the phone in her hand. Claire, she said. Her voice had the quality of someone who had been holding their breath for a very long time, of someone who had been waiting for a particular call to come through. Mom, Claire said, what do you know about Dad's estate that I don't know? A long pause. I need you to come here, Diane said. There are things I should have told you a long time ago, things your father asked me to wait on until the right moment. I am not crazy, Claire thought. There was always something they were not telling me. I am on my way, Claire said. She sat up in the pull-out bed. She found her shoes. She found her coat. She went to Renee's room and knocked on the door and said through the wood, I have to go to my mother's. I will explain everything later. Do you need me to drive you? Renee's voice came back immediately. Also awake. Also waiting. No, Claire said. I need to do this part alone. She went out into the early morning. The city was just beginning. The light was gray and clean. She got in a car and she pointed it toward Connecticut, and she drove toward whatever her father had left waiting for her. The house in Fairfield looked exactly the same as it always had. White paint, black shutters, the oak tree in the front yard that Claire had climbed every summer until she was 12, the bird feeder on the back fence that Owen Whitmore had installed when she was 9, and refilled every Sunday morning without fail. Claire sat in the driveway for a moment before going in. She looked at the house. She thought about all the ordinary Saturday mornings she had spent inside it. Pancakes, the radio playing in the kitchen, her father at the table with his newspaper and his plain ceramic mug and his plain watch and his complete, quiet, unassuming presence. She had never once thought her father was anything other than what he appeared to be. She went inside. Diane was in the kitchen. She had made coffee, and she had set out 2 mugs, and she had put a plate of the butter cookies she always bought from the bakery on Elm Street in the center of the table. She had prepared for this conversation. Claire noticed this. The preparation told her something about how long her mother had been waiting to have it. They sat down across from each other. Diane reached across the table and took both of Claire's hands. Your father was not what he appeared, Diane said. Claire looked at her mother. She waited. He was a private man, intensely private. You know that. You knew so. Diane's hands tightened around Claire's. What you did not know, what he specifically asked me not to tell you until the time was right, was the true nature of what he built. What did he build, Mom? Diane took a breath. Your father was a consultant, yes. That was true, but the consulting was the visible part. Underneath it, over 30 years, he built something else entirely. A series of investments, early technology, real estate in markets that had not been identified yet, private equity partnerships that have since become extremely significant. Diane paused. He never sought publicity. He never sought credit. He specifically structured everything to be invisible. He had reasons for that. What reasons? He was defrauded when he was 29 years old, Diane said, by business partners who came for him after they discovered what he had. He lost nearly everything. It took him 15 years to rebuild. She paused. He was determined that you would never be in that position. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a bird landed on the feeder on the back fence. Mom, Claire said. Her voice was steady. How much? Diane closed her eyes briefly. Open them. $14 billion, she said. In a trust. Only for you. It activates on your 29th birthday. The kitchen did not change. The refrigerator still hummed. The bird was still on the feeder. The butter cookies were still on the plate in the center of the table. $14 billion. Say that again, Claire said. $14 billion, Claire, in an irrevocable trust in your name alone. He did not include me because he said I had always been taken care of, and he wanted you to have you. Diane's voice caught slightly. She steadied it. His exact words were absolute independence. Absolute independence. Owen Whitmore, who wore a plain watch, who drove domestic cars, who sat on the back porch every evening with a newspaper and a cup of tea, who had called her his greatest achievement every year on her birthday since she was old enough to understand the words Claire stood up. She stood up slowly and the way you have to when you are 8 months pregnant, one hand on the table for balance, and she walked to the back door and opened it and stepped out onto the porch. She stood there in the cool morning air for a long time. She looked at the bird feeder. She thought about Owen Whitmore, filling it every Sunday morning, the specific ordinary ritual of it, the way he had done it, without ceremony, without commentary, just as a thing that needed doing, and so he did it. He knew this could happen, she thought. Not the Prescott specifically, but this. Someone coming for you when you are most vulnerable. Someone deciding they have a right to what you have before you even know what you have. He built you an escape hatch. He spent 30 years building you an escape hatch, and he never told you it was there because he wanted you to live freely. He did not want you carrying the weight of it until you needed it. She put her hand on her stomach. Your grandfather, she said quietly to her daughter, was a very interesting man. She breathed the cool air in. She let it out slowly. She went back inside and sat down and picked up her coffee mug and looked at her mother. Tell me everything, she said. Diane talked for 2 hours. She told Claire about Sylvia Holloway, the attorney Owen had trusted above all others, who had been holding the trust documents for 4 years and waiting for Claire's call. She told Claire about the specific structure of the trust, how Owen had closed every door he could think of, how he had anticipated the possibility of someone marrying Claire for access to the money and had made it legally impossible. She told her the trust transferred solely and completely on Claire's 29th birthday, which was in 6 weeks. The memories started arriving then, uninvited and unstoppable, the way memories do when a new piece of information reframes everything you thought you understood. The first time Donovan's family had asked about her background, Margaret's subtle probing about Owen's work, how Margaret had seemed strangely relieved when Claire mentioned her father had died, how Garrett Prescott had once, at a dinner in their 2nd year of marriage, asked Claire almost casually whether she was close with her father's business associates, how Donovan had left a phone call abruptly once when she walked into the room and said it was just my father's people when she asked who he was talking to. Just my father's people. She had thought nothing of it. She had thought nothing of any of it. Mom, she said slowly, did the Prescotts know about the trust? Diane's face answered before her words did. Sylvia believes so, she said carefully. There is documentation suggesting that someone conducted searches for your father's estate documents approximately 4.5 years ago. Before Donovan met you. 4.5 years ago. Before Donovan met her at the gallery. He did not fall in love with her at a gallery opening. He was sent to find her. She deserved better than this. The thought arrived fully formed and completely certain, without drama, without theatrics. She deserved better than this, and her father had known it, and he had spent 30 years making sure that when the moment came, she would have everything she needed to walk away from it with her head up. I need to speak to Sylvia Holloway, Claire said. Her voice was entirely calm, the kind of calm that comes not from the absence of anger, but from the presence of absolute clarity. She has been waiting for your call, Diane said. For 4 years. Sylvia Holloway's office was not what Claire had expected. She had expected something grand, a law firm built to the scale of a $14 billion trust, marble floors, a receptionist with a headset, framed degrees on walls the size of small countries. Instead, Sylvia worked from a brownstone in Hartford. 3 steps up from the sidewalk, a brass knocker on a dark green door. Inside, dark wood and bookshelves and the smell of coffee and old paper. Quiet in the specific way of a place where serious things are handled seriously, without performance. Sylvia herself was 62, silver-haired, dressed in navy blue. She had the particular stillness of someone who had been carrying an enormous secret for a very long time and had learned to hold it without being crushed by it. She stood when Claire came in, and she looked at her with an expression that contained something Claire could not immediately name. It took her a moment to identify it. It was relief. "You look exactly like him," Sylvia said, around the eyes. They sat down. Tea was brought and declined. Claire folded her hands on the desk and said simply, "Tell me everything." Sylvia told her. Owen Whitmore had started building in his mid-30s, 15 years after the fraud that had nearly destroyed him. He had moved quietly and deliberately, identifying technology investments before they were identifiable, acquiring real estate in markets that were invisible to everyone else, forming private equity partnerships through structures so carefully designed that they were genuinely difficult to find unless you knew exactly where to look. He was not lucky, Sylvia said. He was exceptionally patient and exceptionally observant. He understood things about markets that other people did not understand, and he was willing to wait a decade for a decision to pay off. "Why did he never tell me?" Claire said. "Two reasons." Sylvia folded her hands on the desk. First, he did not want the knowledge to change you. He wanted you to build your own identity, your own life, on your own terms. He was afraid that knowing would make you cautious in ways that would limit you. She paused. Second, he was afraid of exactly what happened. He believed that if the knowledge became known while you were young and unmarried, you would become a target. He was right, Claire thought. He was completely right. "The Prescotts," she said. "We cannot prove it was them specifically," Sylvia said carefully, "but we have documentation of searches conducted by a law firm connected to Prescott Holdings for your father's estate documents. These searches occurred approximately 4.5 years ago." She opened the folder in front of her. "Approximately 6 months before Donovan Prescott attended the gallery opening where he met you." The room was quiet. He was never in love with me, Claire thought. I was an acquisition. The thought arrived without self-pity. It arrived as pure information, clear and cold and completely solid. "What does the trust specify regarding marriage?" she said. Sylvia turned to Paige. "The trust transfers to you completely on your 29th birthday, regardless of your marital status. If you are married at the time of transfer, your spouse has no claim to trust assets. Your father was very specific about this. He consulted 3 separate attorneys to ensure the language was airtight. He anticipated someone like Donovan. He anticipated the possibility. Yes." Sylvia paused. "Your father was a man who had been deceived once and spent the rest of his life making sure it could not happen again, to himself or to you." Claire looked at the folder on the desk. Then she looked at Sylvia. "What else?" she said. "There is something else." "I can tell." Sylvia allowed a small smile. "You do look like him. He always knew when I was holding something back as well." She opened a second folder, considerably thicker than the first. "Your father did not merely leave you money," Sylvia said. "He left you leverage." She turned the folder and pushed it across the desk. Claire looked at the document on top. She read it. She read it again. "He owned shares in Prescott Holdings," she said. 19%, Sylvia confirmed. "Acquired quietly over 11 years through 3 separate shell companies, beginning approximately 2 years after the original fraud he experienced, which we now have strong reason to believe was partially orchestrated by Garrett Prescott's early investment firm." Claire sat with this for a moment. Her father had been defrauded by the Prescotts when he was 29 years old. He had lost everything. He had spent 15 years rebuilding, and then quietly, without ever saying a word to anyone, he had spent the next 11 years buying into their company. He had been playing a 30-year game. He had never told anyone the score because the only point was the final one. As a 19% shareholder, Claire said slowly, I will have a seat at the Prescott table. Their board restructures next month, Sylvia said, and I have been in contact with 2 other minority shareholders who have significant dissatisfaction with current Prescott governance. Together, with your 19%, the 3 of you would hold 41%. 41%. Enough to demand a governance review. Enough to force changes. Enough to make the Prescott family acutely aware that they had made a very serious mistake. The Prescotts had not merely failed to steal from Claire Whitmore. They had handed her the key to their own company. That night at Renee's apartment, Claire could not sit still. She spread every document Sylvia had given her across the kitchen floor because there was no table large enough, and she organized them by date and then by category and then by company name. Renee sat on the couch eating cereal and watching her with the expression of someone observing something they cannot quite believe is happening. Your dad owned part of that app, Renee said, pointing at one document. The one I use every day, apparently, and that media company, and 3 hotels in Colorado, and a logistics firm in Ohio. Renee set her cereal bowl down. Claire? I know. Your father was... I know, Renee. It was 2:17 in the morning. Claire's back was genuinely screaming at her. She was 8 months pregnant, sitting on a kitchen floor reading the secret financial history of a man who had driven domestic cars and worn a plain watch and refilled a bird feeder every Sunday morning. She started laughing. She could not help it. It came up out of her from somewhere deep, unexpected, the kind of laughter that has been nowhere to go for a long time. Renee stared at her. Is this a breakdown? I do not know, Claire said. Maybe it is the opposite. She looked around at the documents spread across the floor. $14 billion, 19% of Prescott Holdings, a trust so carefully constructed it was essentially indestructible. And a birthday 6 weeks away. I just have to get there, she thought. I just have to get there. The Prescotts moved faster than Claire expected. 3 days after her meeting with Sylvia, a document arrived through Donovan's attorney. A petition for annulment. The grounds listed were fraud. Specifically, the claim that Claire had concealed material financial information from Donovan prior to the marriage. The irony was extraordinary. Renee read the document twice, slowly, with the focused attention of someone reading something in a language they understand perfectly but find deeply offensive. She set it down on the table with great care. They are claiming you committed fraud, she said. Yes, Claire said. You? Me. The woman who did not know she had $14 billion is being accused of financial fraud by the family that sent their son to marry her specifically to access that money. It is creative, Claire said. I will give them that. She was being dry about it. She was being dry because being dry was the only way to talk about it without the enormity of it becoming something she could not manage. Because underneath the dryness, there was something she had not yet said to Renee. Something she had not said out loud at all. Because saying it out loud would make it completely real. She was scared. She was 37 days from her 29th birthday. She was 8 months pregnant. She was sleeping on a pull-out bed with a bar in the mattress. She had a trust she had never touched, and an attorney she had known for less than a week, and a husband who had responded to her pregnancy and homelessness by sending a legal petition. She went to the bathroom and she ran a bath, and she sat in it for 40 minutes. She did not wash her hair. She did not do anything useful. She sat in the hot water with her enormous stomach rising above the surface, and she breathed. I am my father's daughter, she thought. He lost everything at 29. He rebuilt. He spent 30 years building something so carefully protected that nobody could reach it. I am 37 days from 29. I just have to get there. The baby moved, slow and rolling. I know, Claire said softly. We are going to be okay. She said it with more certainty than she felt, but she said it. She called Sylvia from the bathroom floor, wrapped in a towel, sitting on the cold tile. They filed for annulment, she said. Grounds of fraud. I expected this, Sylvia said. She sounded completely untroubled. This was one of the things Claire had already learned to rely on about Sylvia. She was untroubled by things that were meant to trouble. An annulment actually simplifies the trust transfer considerably, and it removes any argument they might make about marital assets. They are claiming I committed fraud. Yes, it will not hold. The claim requires that you knowingly concealed the information, and we have extensive documentation that you were unaware of the trust's existence. Sylvia paused. Let them file. It actually helps us. Let them file. The words arranged themselves in Claire's mind into something that felt like a strategy, rather than a defeat. What do I do? Claire asked. Continue exactly as you are, Sylvia said. I have a meeting scheduled with Clark Merritt next week. There is one more element of your father's plan I want to walk you through. Something about the Prescott shares specifically. What about them? Your father did not just hold them as an investment, Sylvia said. He held them as a specific instrument. When you see the full picture, you will understand what he intended. What did he intend? Sylvia paused. He intended that if anyone ever came for you, you would already be inside their house. Donovan called that evening. Not his attorney. Him. Claire almost did not answer. She looked at his name on the screen for 4 full rings, then she picked up. Claire? His voice sounded tired. Not performatively tired, genuinely tired, in a way she had not heard since early in their marriage, when he had still sometimes talked to her like she was a person he wanted to tell things to. I need to speak to you, he said. Then speak, she said. I want you to know I did not want it to happen this way. How did you want it to happen? A long pause. She could hear him thinking. She could hear him genuinely uncertain. I do not know, he said. I thought maybe you would figure it out on your own. About your father, about the trust. And we could have a conversation. Like adults. And then what? Claire asked. We could have a conversation, and then what would happen? He did not answer. Donovan, she said. Her voice was not angry. It was something past anger, something quieter and more final. You married me because of the trust. He did not deny it. She had been waiting for this moment. She had known it was coming. She had thought it would feel like something shattering. Instead, it felt like a door closing. Clean, definitive. The sound of a chapter ending so a new one could begin. Did you ever love me? She asked. She genuinely wanted to know. She wanted to know if there had been anything real inside all of it, even a small piece. A very long pause. I think I did, Donovan said finally. I think that is what made it complicated. He loved her and still chose his family's plan. That told her everything she needed to know about what she had been worth to him. Not nothing, but not enough. Not close to enough. She had deserved more than not enough. I am going to protect our daughter, Claire said. Whatever happens between us, I am going to make sure she is taken care of. I hope you will choose to be in her life. But I am not going to wait for you to decide. She hung up. She went to Renee's kitchen and stood at the counter and looked out the window at the city lights for a long time. Somewhere along the way, she thought, I became invisible. Not to everyone, to myself I made myself smaller and smaller, trying to fit inside a life that was not built for me. And I told myself it was fine. And I kept telling myself that until I could not see myself at all anymore. She was not going to do that anymore. She called Sylvia back. "I am ready," she said. "For whatever comes next, I am ready." Clark Merritt arrived at Sylvia's office on a Tuesday morning carrying a briefcase and the air of a man who had been patient for a very long time and was glad the patience was about to end. He was 60 years old, precise in his speech and his clothing. He discussed enormous sums of money the way other people discuss grocery lists, with the easy familiarity of someone for whom these numbers had long since ceased to be abstract. He spread 3 documents across the conference table. He placed them in order. He sat down and looked at Claire. "Your father," he said, "was extraordinarily sophisticated, not just in the scale of what he built, in the architecture of it." He pointed to the first document. "The trust holds the investment portfolio. $14.3 billion as of last month's valuation, diversified across technology, real estate, private equity, and several long-term infrastructure investments that will continue appreciating for decades." He moved to the second document. "The trust also holds, as you know, 19% of Prescott Holdings, acquired over 11 years through 3 separate entities, every share registered to a different holding company, none of which trace back to Owen Whitmore on any public record." He moved to the third document. "What you do not yet know," he said, "is that your father also established contact, 4 years before his death, with 2 other minority shareholders of Prescott Holdings, a retired investment banker who holds 12%, a family trust that holds 10%. Both of these parties have been in a quiet but ongoing dispute with Prescott governance for several years." Claire looked at the documents. She did the arithmetic. 19% plus 12% plus 10%, 41%. "He brokered the relationship," Claire said, "before he died. He set up the alliance and then he left me the position to activate it." "He did not leave it to chance," Clark confirmed. "He corresponded with both parties over a period of 3 years. He explained his situation, not in detail, but enough. He established trust. He made clear that the appropriate time to act would come, and that when it did, someone representing his interests would reach out. He planned even for this," Claire said. "He planned for every version of this he could imagine," Clark said. After the meeting, Claire sat in Sylvia's parking lot for 25 minutes without starting the car. She could not make herself drive yet. She needed to sit with it. She needed to let it become real. She looked at the dashboard. She thought about her father. She thought about Owen Whitmore sitting on the porch in the evenings, reading his newspaper, drinking his tea, wearing his plain watch, all the while holding all of this. All the while running a 30-year game from a porch in Connecticut, quiet and patient and completely certain. She thought about him at her college graduation, the way he had hugged her, one of those rare full hugs that meant something specific. He had said into her hair, "You can do anything you decide to do, Claire. Remember that." She had thought it was a standard father thing to say. She understood now that he had meant it precisely. He had been building the proof of that statement for 30 years. He had been constructing the conditions under which it would be literally, financially, legally, completely true. She called her mother. "Did you know about the Prescott shares?" Claire asked. "No," Diane said. "Sylvia told me this morning. I have been sitting in the garden since." A small laugh between them, the kind of laugh that is also a little bit of crying, the kind that only happens between people who share the same loss. "He really was something," Claire said. "He really was," Diane said. Her voice was soft and full. "He loved you so much, Claire. Everything he built, every single piece of it, it was all for you. Claire stayed in the parking lot until the feeling that was too large for her chest had moved into something she could carry. Then she drove back to Renee's apartment. She called Preston Vale that evening, the Prescott family attorney. She had his number from the annulment documents. He answered with the careful neutrality of an attorney, receiving a call he had been warned might come. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "I am not certain this conversation is—" "I am the controlling beneficiary of a trust holding 19% of Prescott Holdings," Claire said. "I have been in contact with 2 additional minority shareholders. Together, we hold 41% of the company. I imagine you will want to discuss this with your clients before the board restructuring meeting next month." A silence so complete she could hear him blinking. "Additionally," she said, "we have documentation of certain activities by Garrett Prescott's early investment firm that the appropriate regulatory bodies would find very interesting. Sylvia Holloway is prepared to share that documentation if we cannot reach a reasonable arrangement." A reasonable arrangement, the phrase Margaret Prescott had used when she handed Claire a bag and told her to leave. "I will need to speak with the family," Preston said. "Of course," Claire said. "I will give you 48 hours." She hung up. She stood in Renee's kitchen in the quiet of the evening, and she felt, for the first time since walking out of the Prescott mansion, like herself. Fully, completely, without apology herself. Starting over did not feel impossible anymore. Starting over felt like exactly the right thing. Staying had always felt worse. She just had not let herself know that until now. 3 weeks before her birthday, Ainsley Prescott called. Claire almost did not answer. Then she remembered what Ainsley had been. Never cruel, never an ally, but never cruel. She answered. "I heard what my mother did," Ainsley said. No preamble. Direct in a way Claire had not expected from her. "I want you to know I think it was wrong." "Why are you calling me?" Claire asked. A pause. "Because I have spent my entire life watching my mother operate this way, and I have never said anything. You are pregnant, and she kicked you out, and I am—" The sentence stopped, then restarted. "I am ashamed of us." It sounded like it cost her something to say. "Thank you," Claire said. "That matters. If you need anything, for the baby, I will let you know," Claire said. She told Renee about the call later that evening. Renee listened and then said, "I never understood what you saw in that family. I mean, I saw what you saw. I just never believed it." "Why did you not say something?" "Because you were happy," Renee said simply. "Or you seemed happy, and I did not want to be the person who took that from you." Claire considered this. She turned it over. "I think I knew," she said finally. "I think I knew something was wrong. I saw the signs. I just decided not to look directly at them." "Yeah," Renee said. "We do that." "The hardest part," Claire said, "is admitting that I knew all along." Renee put her hand on top of Claire's and did not say anything else, which was exactly right. The days settled into a rhythm. Morning coffee with Renee, afternoon calls with Sylvia, evening walks around the block that were less walks, and more very slow shuffles. Eleanor, now so present in her body that every step required negotiation. She read the documents Clark had given her. She learned the shape of what her father had built. She learned the names of every company in the portfolio, every partnership, every investment. She was learning her inheritance not as a number, but as a landscape. She was doing what her father had done. She was preparing. The night her water broke, she was watching television on Renee's couch and eating crackers, because nothing else had sounded good for 3 days. The television was on, but she was not watching it. She was looking at a photograph on Renee's bookshelf, a photograph from their first year of college. The two of them at some party they no longer remembered specifically, laughing at something neither of them could now recall. They both looked very young and very unworried. She thought, I was not worried then, because I did not know yet what there was to worry about. Now I know, and I am still okay. That is something. Then she felt it. 3:47 in the morning. She looked down. She looked up at the television. She looked at the crackers. Renee, she said. Renee was asleep in the bedroom. Renee, she said louder. The sound of Renee sitting up abruptly. What happened? I think we need to go, Claire said. The next 20 minutes were the particular organized chaos of a moment everyone has prepared for, but which still manages to be surprising in its arrival. Renee found the hospital bag Claire had packed 3 weeks ago. Claire found her shoes. Renee called the car. Claire called her mother. And then, after a moment's pause, she called Sylvia, because Sylvia had specifically asked to be called, and Claire had said she would. Sylvia answered on the second ring. It is time, Claire said. I will meet you at the hospital, Sylvia said, and hung up. She did not call Donovan. She made this decision consciously, clearly without guilt. She would tell him after. He could choose what to do with that information. That would be his first test. Labor was the most completely present she had ever been in her body. Everything else? The trust, the Prescotts, the annulment petition, the 41%, the 30-year game her father had played. All of it receded to a very great distance, and what remained was just her body and her breathing, and the nurses, and Renee's voice, and her mother's hand on her arm, and the very specific work of bringing her daughter into the world. She had Eleanor at 7:42 in the morning, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, dark hair already, Owen Whitmore's nose. Claire could see it immediately. That specific nose, the slight upturn at the end, her father's nose on this brand new face. She held her daughter in the white hospital light. She said the name she had been carrying for months. The name she had decided on the week after she drove to Fairfield and sat in her mother's kitchen and heard the truth about Owen Whitmore for the first time. Eleanor, she said. Eleanor Owen Whitmore. Not Prescott. Whitmore. Renee was crying silently in the chair by the window. Diane was holding a cold cup of coffee she had forgotten she was holding. Sylvia stood near the door with her hands folded, and an expression that was, for the first time since Claire had met her, not the expression of a woman keeping a secret. It was the expression of a woman who had been waiting to see the end of a story and was seeing it now. Donovan called 6 hours later. By then Eleanor had been weighed and measured and wrapped and placed in a little plastic bassinet, and Claire had eaten scrambled eggs and was trying unsuccessfully to sleep. She looked at his name on the screen. She let it ring. He would get a message from her attorney in the morning. Everything she needed to say to Donovan Prescott could now be said through Sylvia Holloway, and said much more effectively than it could be said by Claire alone, exhausted, in a hospital room, holding her newborn daughter. She looked at Eleanor in the bassinet. Her father would have loved her. She was absolutely certain of this. He would have loved her with the same quiet, complete, unremarkable devotion with which he had loved Claire. He would have taught her to refill the bird feeder. He would have sat on the porch with her in the evenings. I know what to do now, Claire thought. She was completely certain of it. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she slept. Claire's 29th birthday arrived 11 days after Eleanor was born. It was a Tuesday, overcast and mild. Eleanor had been awake twice in the night and was now sleeping in the portable bassinet Diane had brought over, making the small snuffling sounds of a baby who has recently decided, for the moment, that everything is fine. Renee was making coffee, Diane was in the armchair by the window, reading with her glasses on, the particular posture of a woman who has been helping for days and has settled into it. Sylvia's message arrived at 9:14 in the morning. The trust has transferred. Congratulations, Claire. Your father would be very proud. Clark Merritt's documentation arrived at 9:30. Formal, comprehensive. $14.3 billion transferred to accounts in Claire Whitmore's sole name as per the provisions of the Owen Whitmore Irrevocable Trust. Claire was sitting on Renee's couch in a nursing bra and the yoga pants she had been wearing for 4 days. She had not washed her hair since Sunday. She was feeding Eleanor with the focused attention of someone still learning something new and important. She showed the phone to Renee without saying anything. Renee read it, set the phone down, looked at Claire, looked at Eleanor, looked back at Claire. "What are you going to do?" Renee asked. "I am going to do exactly what my father built this for," Claire thought. "I am going to live freely." But first, she called Preston Vale. He answered immediately. He had been waiting. She could hear it in the speed of his answer, in the careful preparation in his voice. "Ms. Whitmore," he said. "The trust transferred this morning," she said. "I assume you are aware." "Yes." Then I think we are ready to discuss the terms I outlined." She had been composing the terms in her head for days. She had talked through them with Sylvia. She had refined them until they were exactly what she needed and nothing more. She was not interested in punishment. She was not interested in maximum damage. She was interested in Eleanor's future and in clean endings and in never having to think about the Prescott family again after this was done. "The annulment can proceed unchallenged," she said. "I have no interest in contesting it. What I require in exchange is straightforward. Full legal custody of Eleanor, with reasonable visitation rights for Donovan if he chooses, and I mean genuinely chooses, to be present in her life. A trust established in Eleanor's name as part of the settlement, funded by Prescott Holdings, with terms Sylvia Holloway will specify. A complete accounting of all assets during the marriage, and a full and final non-disparagement agreement from all members of the Prescott family." She paused. "In exchange, I will not take the regulatory documentation Sylvia Holloway has compiled regarding Garrett Prescott's early investment activities to the appropriate bodies, and I will not use my current shareholder position to call for an emergency governance review at the board meeting next month." The silence on the other end was comprehensive. "I will need to consult with my clients," Preston said. "Of course," Claire said. "You have 48 hours. Sylvia will send the formal documentation within the hour." She hung up and looked at Eleanor, who had finished feeding and was looking up at her with the unfocused gaze of a baby discovering that there are things to look at. "Your grandfather would have liked that," Claire told her. "He was a very efficient person." The response from Preston Vale came in 36 hours. Not 48. They were more eager to close this than she had expected, which meant the regulatory documentation was more dangerous to them than she had known. Everything she had asked for was accepted. She signed her copies on a Thursday morning in Sylvia's office. Sylvia sat across the desk. Clark Merritt sat to the side as a witness. Eleanor was in her carrier, facing outward, looking at the room with the expression of a person who finds everything extremely interesting. When the last page was signed, Sylvia looked at her across the desk. "Your father," she said, prepared for every version of this he could imagine. "But I think if he had been able to see how you handled it, he would have said he had not imagined quite this well." Claire looked at the signed documents. She thought about Owen on the porch, the plane watch, the bird feeder, the 30 years of patient, purposeful work. "He started this," Claire said. I just finished it. She picked up Eleanor's carrier. She stood up. She felt lighter than she had in months. Not light in the sense of unburdened exactly, light in the sense of correctly weighted. Everything exactly as heavy as it should be, and nothing heavier. She walked out into the Tuesday afternoon. The sky was still overcast, mildly warm, the kind of day that does not announce itself as significant in any way, and yet somehow is. She had $14 billion, a signed settlement, a daughter named Eleanor Owen Whitmore, and nowhere she had to be except wherever she decided to go next. She stood on the sidewalk outside Sylvia's brownstone and breathed the afternoon air. Her father had given her absolute independence, not the idea of it, the actual, literal, documented, irrevocable fact of it. She was going to use it well. The meeting at Prescott Holdings happened on a Tuesday, 10 days after the settlement was signed. Claire had requested it. She did not have to. The legal matters were closed. She could have walked away without ever seeing any of them again. But she had requested it because there was something she needed to do that could not be done through attorneys. Something that was not about leverage or strategy. Something that was personal. She arrived alone. She wore a dark navy blazer she had bought the week before. Under it, a simple white shirt. She was carrying a bag she had owned for years. The kind of bag that was functional and unpretentious and belonged to her entirely. On her wrist, Owen Whitmore's plain watch. Her mother had found it in a box of his things and sent it the week Eleanor was born. It fit Claire's wrist perfectly, as though it had been sized for her. She did not know why that struck her the way it did. She just knew that wearing it felt like bringing him with her. The lobby of Prescott Holdings was everything the Prescott family was. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, art on the walls that had been selected to communicate a specific message about the kind of people who lived here. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. The boardroom had a long table and floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city. Margaret Prescott sat at the head. Garrett sat to her left. Donovan sat slightly back from the table, to the side, the position of someone who has been placed there and told not to speak. Ainsley was not there. She had texted Claire that morning. I will not be there. I think that is better for both of us. Good luck, Claire had texted back. Thank you for the call. It mattered. She walked to the table. She pulled out the chair directly across from Margaret, the center of the table. She sat down. Margaret looked at her. The recalibration in her expression was subtle, but visible. This was not the Claire who had stood in the dining room with her hand on her stomach, being informed of her own removal. This was someone else. Someone Margaret was reassessing in real time. Thank you for meeting with me, Claire said. Of course, Margaret said, with the controlled graciousness of someone who did not have a choice and knows that you know it. I want to say something first, Claire said, before we address any remaining logistics. She looked at Donovan. He looked back at her. For the first time in this entire ordeal, he met her eyes directly. She did not know what she had expected to feel in this moment. What she felt was something simpler than she expected, something close to pity, not for what had been done to her, for what he had chosen, for the life he was going to continue living inside a family that had made him into someone who could marry a woman for her money and stand in a doorway and watch her leave. I want Eleanor to know her father if he chooses to be present, Claire said. I will not speak ill of the Prescott family to her. She will have access to her father's family if she chooses as she grows older. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what I have done here was not about revenge. She paused. My father was defrauded when he was young. He could have spent his life wanting revenge. He did not. He spent his life building something. He built it so carefully that when the time came, Everything that had been done against him simply became irrelevant. His creation made the damage irrelevant. She looked at Garrett Prescott. "That is what I intend to do," she said. Garrett Prescott looked at her for the first time as though he was actually seeing her. There was something in his face. Respect, possibly, or the particular feeling of a man who has just understood that he has lost a game he did not know he was playing until the end. Margaret said, "Your father was a formidable man." "Yes," Claire said. "He was. He outsmarted us," Margaret said. There was nothing in her voice. Not bitterness, not admiration, just the flat recognition of a fact. "Yes," Claire said. "He did." A pause. "You are very like him," Margaret said. It was not warm, but it was honest. It was the most honest thing Margaret Prescott had said to her in 3 years. "Thank you," Claire said. "I will take that." She stood up. She shook Garrett's hand. She nodded to Margaret. She looked at Donovan one last time. "Be good to her," she said. "When you are ready." She picked up her bag. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed. She stood in the elevator alone, going down, and she exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Her father's watch was cool against her wrist. She touched it with the fingertips of her other hand. "Thank you," she thought, "for all of it." The lobby doors opened onto the city. She walked out. 6 weeks after Eleanor was born, Claire bought a house. She could have bought something grand. She was aware of this. In the way you are aware of a door you choose not to open. She had $14 billion and the kind of freedom that very few people have in an actual, practical sense. The kind that is not theoretical, but real and solid and entirely hers. She chose a white colonial in Connecticut, a quiet street, a back garden with an old fence that needed some repair, a porch that faced west, catching the late afternoon light in exactly the way she had been imagining for the 6 weeks since she had made the decision to leave everything behind and begin. The porch was the reason she bought the house. She moved in on a Thursday. Her mother came Thursday evening and helped her put sheets on the bed and organize the kitchen. They talked while they worked, not about anything specific, just the pleasant ongoing conversation of two people who are comfortable in silence and in words equally. Eleanor slept in her carrier in the kitchen while they moved around her like a small son. Renee arrived on Saturday with a bottle of good wine for herself and a bag of excellent coffee for Claire and a houseplant she had carefully selected for its apparent indestructibility. "You cannot kill this one," Renee said, setting it on the kitchen counter. "I looked it up. Multiple sources confirmed. I killed the last one," Claire said. "I know, that is why I looked it up." They sat on the back porch in the late afternoon, and Renee drank her wine, and Claire drank her coffee. And Eleanor slept in the carrier on Claire's chest, and they talked about nothing and everything, the way they had been talking since they were 18 years old. Ainsley Prescott came on Sunday afternoon, tentatively, with a gift for Eleanor wrapped in yellow paper and the posture of someone who was not sure they would be allowed inside. Claire opened the door. "Come in," she said. "The coffee is fresh." Ainsley looked at her for a moment. Something in her face relaxed slightly. The specific relaxation of someone who has been holding themselves ready to be turned away. "Thank you," Ainsley said. They sat in the living room among the half-unpacked boxes, and Claire thought that this was perhaps a friendship that would grow slowly and carefully and would need patience, and that she had patience now, and that seemed right. A card came from Donovan that week, handwritten on heavy cream stationery, the kind the Prescotts had always used for everything. "I hope she has your warmth. and your father's steadiness. I am sorry I was not the man either of you deserved." Claire read it once. She put it in a box she had marked, simply, Eleanor's. A box for things that belonged to Eleanor's story that Eleanor should have access to when she was old enough to want them. The full story. All of it. Not the comfortable version, but the real one. She believed Eleanor deserved the real one. She had been composing things she would tell Eleanor, loosely, in the quiet hours. Not a speech, not a lesson, just truths she had learned through the specific, irreplaceable education of the past several months. She would tell Eleanor, "Your grandfather built everything he had so that you would never have to be afraid. Never feel that someone else held the key to your life. He did not build it out of anger, though he had reasons for anger. He built it out of love, the same love that sat on a back porch every evening and refilled a bird feeder every Sunday and told a girl she could do anything she decided to do." She would tell her, "People will come for you. Some of them will come with smiles. Watch what they do more carefully than what they say. The difference between the two is where the truth lives." She would tell her, "The hardest thing I ever did was not walking out of a mansion with one bag. The hardest thing was admitting that I had seen what was true and chosen not to look directly at it. Looking directly at hard things takes practice. You can start practicing early. I should have." She would tell her, "We are Whitmores. Your great-grandfather earned that name over 30 years of patient work and quiet love. You were born into it. That is not a weight. That is a gift." On a Thursday evening in late October, when the air had the first cool edge of autumn and the light was doing the particular thing it does in October in Connecticut, that long golden specific thing that makes every ordinary moment look as though it has been carefully lit, Claire carried Eleanor out to the back porch. She sat in the wooden chair she had bought specifically for this. A good chair. Solid. The kind built to last for decades. She put Owen's watch on the small table beside her. Eleanor was looking at the light. Her whole face was open to it. The complete, unstudied attention of a baby discovering that light is beautiful and that beauty is everywhere once you look. Claire looked at the garden, at the fence that needed repairing, at the sky going from gold to amber to the first soft blue of evening. She thought about her father. She thought about everything he had built and everything he had quietly loved and everything he had refused to let anyone take from him or from her. She thought about the fraud at 29 and the 15 years of rebuilding and the 30 years of patient positioning and the plain watch worn every day through all of it. He had not done any of it for power. She understood this completely now. He had done it so that she would have a door that was always open, that no one could close, that she could walk through at any moment in her life and find on the other side exactly what he had named it. Absolute independence. She had walked through it. The freedom win, Sylvia had called it. The only victory that lasts. She was not in the Prescott dining room anymore. She was not in a car being driven away from everything she had thought was hers. She was not on a pull-out bed with a bar in the mattress, staring at a ceiling and reconstructing 3 years of signs she had not let herself read. She was on her own porch, in her own chair, with her father's watch and her daughter and the Connecticut October light going gold and amber and blue. She thought about what she had understood, slowly, over these months, the thing that had assembled itself in the quiet hours between feeding and sleeping and reading and learning the shape of what her father had built. The prison door had been unlocked all along. She had been her own warden. She had been so focused on repairing the cage, on making herself smaller so it would fit, on finding reasons to believe the cage was actually a home that she had not tried the door. The door had been open. She had just had to stop trying to fix the walls and start walking toward it. She looked at Eleanor. Eleanor was still watching the light. The last of it now, the sky deepening, the garden going quiet, the specific, beautiful moment her father had called his favorite time of day. The moment between one thing and the next. "Your grandfather loved this time of evening," Claire said softly. "He would sit out here and watch the light go. Just this. Nothing else required." Eleanor made a small sound. Interested. "I think he knew something about this that I am only beginning to understand," Claire said. "That the ordinary moments are not the space between the significant ones. They are the significant ones. The porch in the evenings, the bird feeder on Sunday mornings, the plain watch." She picked up Owen's watch from the little table. She turned it over in her hands. Simple, unadorned, a watch that kept perfect time and asked nothing of anyone looking at it. She put it back. "He would have loved you," she told Eleanor. "He would have loved you so much." She said it without the particular ache she had been carrying, not without love, with love, actually, with so much of it that there was no room for the ache anymore. Just the love and the evening light in the garden and the new chapter with its wide open ending. "We are going to be okay," she said, not the way she had said it in Renee's bathroom, with more certainty than she felt. This time she said it because it was simply true, because the evidence was in, because her father had spent 30 years making sure it would be true, and she had spent the last months proving it, and the proof was complete. We are going to be more than okay. The light faded. The sky went from blue to the deep, soft dark of early evening. The first stars appeared. Eleanor had fallen asleep against Claire's chest, warm and solid and entirely present. Claire stayed on the porch. She had $14 billion and a signed settlement and a daughter named Eleanor Owen Whitmore and a white colonial in Connecticut with a west-facing porch. She had a best friend who came on Saturdays with coffee and indestructible plants. She had a mother in Fairfield who called every morning. She had an attorney in Hartford who had kept faith with her father's trust for 4 years without once wavering. She had a new chapter with no predetermined ending. She had, for the first time she could remember, the complete and settled knowledge that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, not because anyone had put her there, because she had chosen it. Because she had walked through the door her father had spent 30 years building, and she was standing on the other side of it now with her whole life in front of her and no one's permission required. The evening deepened. She stayed. Owen Whitmore's daughter, on her own porch, in the last light, with her own child sleeping against her heart, exactly where she decided to be, exactly free. Editorial disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team with the purpose of delivering meaningful stories, life lessons, and emotional value to our audience. Every detail has been thoughtfully crafted to inspire, validate, and remind you that no matter how hard things get, your story is not over.